Okay, so my original intention was just to take the upper control arm bushings and replace them and pop the upper control arm back on. But as luck would have it, I guess it's just in the cards. You guys need more information about this because, you know, I got a couple of messages that said, hey, what about the rest of it? I want to know how to get this stuff apart. So here we are. So I'm going to take the carrier off, the spindle, if you will. I'm going to take that off, but I'm going to have to show you guys how to get this off in order to move on to the next step. So all of this is going to be bite size. I may make a big video with everything included in it and then just narrate over it. I don't know. But at this point in time, I'm just doing upper control arm, spindle, brake removal, yada yada, and I'll just do little tiny videos. That way you guys can jump right to what you need rather than jumping through the video. So in order to get the spindle off, or the carrier, I mean, you know, tomato, different manufacturers call it different things. In order to get this off, we have to take the brake caliper off, and we need to take the rotor off. We don't necessarily need to do that, but I really don't want to bleed the brakes, and I'm not changing the brake hoses, although I may, after looking at them, I may just end up doing that too. So who knows? Just depends on how rambunctious I decided I want to get during this project. So the car's down for the winter. It is what it is. So in order to take the spindle itself off, you at the minimum need to disconnect the brake hose and the anti-lock brake wheel sensor. And then you have to remove the tie rod end, the lower ball joint, and this here, which is already removed, the upper ball joint. And then you can pull everything off as an assembly. But instead of doing that, you know, not everybody is as strong as I am. So what we're going to do is we're going to take the caliper off. This is all one piece here. So what you got to do is you got to take this bolt off. There's another one underneath on the other side there. If you're doing this, you may want to take and evaluate whether your rotors and brake pads need to be replaced at this time. So take in consideration, you may want to take them up and get them turned while they're off the car. That being said, it never hurts to grease this stuff, so just kind of keep that in the back of your mind. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to take these two brake caliper bolts off, and I had the socket around here. 13/16 is the size. I've already loosened them up. It was kind of a bear trying to get them loose, and so I just did that off camera. I need my reducer. Where's my reducer? Of course, it's on a breaker bar still. So I did that off camera, and what we're going to do here is we're going to take both of these caliper bolts off, and you can do this with the upper control arm in the car. I would prefer to do that. I originally wasn't going to do all this, but then I decided, you know what? Let's snap that in, right? But then I decided, you know what? Let's just go ahead and do this. Let's get this out of my way real quick. Be careful with this. Sometimes these are old and brittle. Depends on what region of the country you're in. Southwest, they tend to dry out. All that plastic stuff tends to dry out. So be careful about that. We got plenty of room here now. Take this bolt out. Take it most of the way out. And then in my case, I am going to be replacing the brake pads, and I'm going to get the rotors turned. So that's going to be something that I'm going to do later. But when you do this, you want to kind of look at your brake pads, your brake calipers, see what kind of state of repair they're in. Because if you daily drive them, you see right there, that's a rubber boot in here. Those get dry rotted, they crack, sometimes they leak, and they'll get dust and dirt inside of the caliper, and it becomes a gigantic mess. So what we're going to do, once we get this loose, I'm going to take this bolt here, put that there. This might decide to run away on you. See, it's kind of loose, but there's a little bit of a rust ridge on the rotor, and your rotor may not have that. Or not a rust ridge, but a wear line on it from the pad scouring it down. Take them bolts, set them there. Careful of this hose. Support the rotor. We're going to just jam this in here like this. Just pry against it. It's not going to hurt anything. And then just pull it off as an assembly. Make sure you got a good hold of it, because if that brake hose is still good, you're going to destroy it if you drop that. It ends up putting a lot of shock load on that hose. You want to make sure that the hose isn't kinked. So we've got that out of the way. Now we can move this back over here. That's not going to hurt anything. This right here has a little cotter pin up underneath here to remove the upper control arm. There's a ball joint. There's a little stud that goes through there. Has the same setup here, and they're 18 millimeter. Xavier probably put that away, didn't he? Probably put that away in the toolbox in the main part. He did. What a good little boy. 18. There we go. So what we're going to do is we are going to straighten these little ears out on this pin, and then we can push it out. There is a certain way that these go, as calls for in the service manual, so do keep in mind. If you're in a different climate, northern climate, where there's rust issues, you may want to replace these. Sometimes you can get away with reusing them. All right, this here, what you're going to end up with here, 18 millimeter socket, and we're just going to use the reducer. Got a few things kind of running around here at the same time. Now all this stuff here you probably do before you remove the upper control arm. Actually, I would recommend you do before you remove the upper control arm. But it is what it is. I was interested in doing another type of video for another thing, and that's just how we got where we are. In another video I recommended pickle fork. And you can certainly use a pickle fork for this. But there's another tool I want to kind of demonstrate the use of, and that is this little guy here. Basically what it is it's called a ball joint separator. Basically, you get the idea here. Goes in between your ball joint or your tie rod, and the stud goes in here like this. You screw the bolt in, the bolt pushes, and bada bing, bada boom. So we're gonna demonstrate that here real quick here. You may need a ball peen hammer to get it kind of in position, but make sure you're up underneath the boot, the dust boot, and pay attention to what you're hitting. Back behind you, because it may be painted. And we're going to do this. So 13, 16. When you're moving stuff from one side of the car to the other, stuff tends to vanish. So, so anyway, basically what you're going to do is you're going to tighten this up. Let me get a good bite on it, and then I'll go at it. You're going to tighten this up, and that's all it took on that. It didn't really take much pressure at all. When we do the ball joint, I'll do the passenger side ball joint on camera. That way you guys can see what's going on here. But when you get this stuff apart, some of this stuff, it's like this tie rod. This tie rod's got some play in it, so I'm going to replace this tie rod. I'm going to replace the other tie rod. Inner tie rod's pretty good, but I'm going to replace these tie rods while I got everything apart. That being said, you want to make sure that your wires and everything are out of the way. You see this guy right here. Want to make sure that we can get up underneath there. There's a little pin here, kind of like the one on the tie rod. Now, I understand a lot of people have different ways of doing things, and cars that come from the north tend to not look this clean and good, so I apologize. That, and I like to have clean car, so if you think this car's clean, you should see my RX-7. My RX-7's really clean, along with my Excursion. That's really clean too. I do not like rust. I do not like oil. I do not like green eggs and ham. Not sure what's going on here. Come on. Come on, come on. I'm not going to take the shock off in this video because, frankly, we're pretending that the upper control arm's still on the car. Okay, guys? This in here is going to be a pain in the butt. Probably should have worked at straightening that out a little bit better. Probably what I got to... Yeah, we'll do that. Straighten it out a little bit better. Look at that. There we go. Like I said, some of these you'll be able to reuse, some of them you won't. Take a hammer to that when you get it out. If you got a little bitty bench vise or something, just whack that with a hammer. All right, now what we're going to do is we're going to take that. Let's figure out which one that is. A bunch of sockets over here for no reason, apparently. Right. Is that 70? All right, here we go. All right. So this situation here, let's just break out the breaker bar. Make sure this wire's out of the way because you can break that. There's a quick disconnect in there too, but I'm not worried about that. These usually aren't torqued down too bad because for the simple fact that, well, there's just no need to. You know, that wire is just going to be a pain in the butt, isn't it? So I'm just going to unclip that. Has the same style clip as up there. Has that style clip there. So here we go. Now there's a washer on this. Try not to lose that washer. Now if you're replacing all right, so I ended up having to do it the tried and true method. What I did was I took and put this big pry bar, or it's a big screwdriver. But I took this big pry bar, put it underneath here, and then I just put a little bit of tension, just like this, underneath the spindle. Hit the spindle twice with the hammer, which is just a little bitty ball peen hammer, and it popped right off. This thing right here was just not doing it for me. It just wasn't doing it. Wasn't doing the job. Obviously, on the tie rod worked great. On the other side, it actually popped right off. But that just goes to show you that not every method is gonna work 100% of the time. And you know, although this is a clever tool, I think that it has its uses, it has its pros, and it has its cons. Like I said, I've used this type of tool in the past and on tie rods and ball joints and stuff like this, and I've had good luck with it, but it's not a end-all be-all. So when we've got this down to where we're at right now, if you come over here and look, this is where I put the caliper. We've got the ABS sensor just hanging there. Make sure you have your brake line, no kinks in it. And while you're at this, make sure that there aren't any kinks or anything in the brake line. But when you go to AutoZone or something, brake hose, brake line. So just hard is the line, hose is the flexible part. This is the line. That's the hose. So I am going to replace the shocks on the lower control arm, or I'm sorry, on the bottom of the spindle that I just took off. I did notice that there's some damage there that I didn't make. You got some damage right here, so that tells me that somebody's had a pickle fork at that at one point, which no big deal. It's not that big a deal. It doesn't hurt anything, but some people have you know, their opinions about pickle forks, and that's their prerogative. But you know, it is what it is. I assume it was ball joints, because these ball joints on the bottom seem to be pretty tight. I know the upper ball joints are originals, but the lower ball joints don't appear to be originals at all. And I'm not entirely positive, but I think there's a plate missing on both sides that shields this on the other side here. I'm not entirely positive, but it does show it in the service manual. But like I said, I'm going to replace the tie rod ends. The inner tie rod feels good. The outer tie rod feels but I do have a pair of those. It is what it is. I'm going to replace the sway bar bushings, the end-link bushings, these bushings here, and the next job I'm going to be doing is removing the lower control arm. I'm not entirely positive if I'm high enough off the ground to do that, but you know, when I get the time to come back out here and mess around, I'm going to tackle that project. As far as that's concerned, by the time you watch that, you're probably going to see that I have the bushing, upper control arm bushing replacement video up. I'm just going to take my time with this stuff and posting stuff. But if you have questions or anything regarding all this stuff, you know, you're more than welcome to ask. I may not know much about it, you know, whatever you're asking, but it is what it is. As far as this stuff here is concerned, you know, when you're looking at your shock, you see stuff like that, that's fine. You just don't want oil leaking down. But I think I'm going to replace these with like Z51 shocks. I've heard people, because this has the FE1 suspension, which is the base smooth ride suspension, and everybody says you should do Z51 shocks, and yeah, some people seem to really like them, so I think that's what we're probably going to end up doing. But I may end up putting the shocks back on and just cleaning them up and putting them back on. I don't know. It just depends. It depends on how I feel about it. I'm not trying to cheap out or nothing. I just want to save some projects for next year. As far as all of this is concerned, you know, take your time. And when you've got all this stuff apart like this, take your time to clean stuff. Like in this situation, you have a perfect opportunity to take a brush and get this stuff cleaned. Clean. It's one thing I hate more than anything is a dirty car. And as you guys can see with my engine bay. Anyway, guys, that's it. I'm done rambling. I'm done working on this for the day. And yeah, if you have anything you're doing to your car, please share it in the comment section below. And we'll all enjoy the commentary. You guys have a good one. I'll catch you in the next one.